most guitar players learn the pentatonic scale and then they just stop there. They solo over blues progressions, it kind of works, but it never quite sings. Then they hear players like Robin Ford, Marcus King, and Jack Ruch, and suddenly it's a different language. More soul, more color, more story. So what is the difference? In this episode, we sit down with one of Nashville's most respected blues guitar players.
So if I'm working on these blues arpeggios, like these dominant seventh arpeggios for blues, the first thing I'm gonna think is
to break down the 5 levels of blues guitar, from the basics that you're stuck in now to the sophisticated moves that greats use to turn heads. And the best part is, it's fairly simple, you just have to know what to listen for. Let's dive in.
Hey Jack,
hey, what's going on?
welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Today we're going to be digging into some really cool stuff. The plan for today is to explore the 5 levels of blues guitar. So we're going to be starting at the very rudimentary level, kind of where beginners should sort of start. And we're going to go all the way through really advanced levels of guitar. And just for a little bit of context, would you mind kind of telling folks a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Jack Ruch. I'm a guitar player here in Nashville. I've been here for about 12 years. And these days, I mostly do online education stuff. Since, a few years ago, I kind of transitioned into that and have a bunch of courses out, and I do a YouTube channel and all that stuff. But, I grew up playing blues. I still play clubs a few nights a week. I'm kind of come from that world and that background. But yeah, I primarily am doing teaching and education stuff these days.
Right on. Yeah, if you're ever in Nashville at the Underdog on Thursday nights.
Yeah, we're there every Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing show. It's definitely worth coming out and checking it out.
It's a good time.
Well, I'm excited to explore this terrain because you are a certified badass at blues guitar and a lot of other styles as well.
Man.
But I think one of the things that I know when I first heard your playing, I was blown away by the sophistication of note choices and articulation. That's really part of your special sauce. And I love the way that you explain things. I'm excited to kind of dive in and explore this terrain.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So starting off here, I'm curious, level 1, what do you think folks should be learning when they're first kicking off?
Well, if you're just starting out playing guitar, chords are kind of the foundation for everything on the fretboard, like learning your way around the fretboard. Even if you're an intermediate or advanced player, learning more chord voicings, more chord options, inversions, and things that stretch up the fretboard is kind of your basic blueprint for seeing stuff around the fretboard. And the guitar is such a shape-based instrument because it's unlike piano or other instruments. You've got multiple places to play the same notes. So you kind of end up getting into these shapes which help you kind of navigate the fretboard. So, when you're first learning a tune or a song structure like a blues, learning the basic chords and then learning the form, understanding, okay, it stays on this chord for this many measures and then it changes to this chord. And the blues is like a classic song form. There's a million variations and different types of blueses, but at its most simple, it's like the 12-bar blues with 3 chords, right? And the form is, the 1 chord, or, if we're in the key of G, that would be like a G major chord, and it does that for 4 bars, and then it goes to the 4 chord, the C major chord, and then back to the 1 chord, so 2 bars of C, back to 2 bars of G, and then it goes to the 5 chord D for a bar, 4 chord C for a bar, and then into what's called the turnaround section, which is the most simple way would just be play another 2 bars of G, right? So just learning that basic, your basic open chord voicings and really understanding the form and starting to internalize the structure, because that's a huge part of being able to play with other musicians or accompany yourself if you're, playing acoustic guitar and singing, or if you're jamming with friends. And it takes a while. When I was like a kid starting out, internalizing that structure to where you're able to feel where the chord changes are happening and kind of lock in rhythmically takes a little while. But once you get that, you kind of cross that bridge, other things open up, because now you can kind of relax into the song form and start to experiment with different things you want to play.
So what does that sound like? What's that full form?
Yeah, so if we play, well, I'll just play like a slow blues type of thing. So if I'll just start, okay. 1, 2, 4. Right, so I threw a few extra things in there to kind of lead you along, but that's pretty basic, open cowboy chord, 12-bar blues form.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll get into some of the like more chord tone oriented playing too. But it sounds like you were, number one, walking the bass into the root note.
Yeah, well, that's just because we're sitting here and I'm playing by myself, and it's kind of like, trying to. I mean, a big part of it is like hearing those things. It is all those little things kind of lead your ear along.
Throwing in the flat 7, that kind of thing.
Yeah, to just sort of so that you can kind of feel the form.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the first big thing, and then from there, it's like learning more ways to play that around the fretboard. I mean, if you're really a beginner, it's like you just got to learn some basic chord shapes, chord forms, like learning your bar chord forms for those chords, your G chord, your C chord. I mean, there's all these, voicings and positions and things you can play in, but like when you're starting out, a lot of people just learn these basic, bar chord forms. Of course, you can play that same thing, with that type of form. I mean, you can, this is getting into like what they call the caged thing, which is like spreading your open chords up across the fretboard. I mean, you can play G there, C, and D. You have all these different inversions and shapes for playing these chords. Some of them work better than others. Some of them are more practical than others. I mean, it's an experimentation thing. And then just listening to a lot of music. If you're trying to get into playing the blues, getting up, when I was starting out, it was like you get a stack of good blues albums and you listen to them and you hear what guys are doing.
Yeah.
Start picking up on the little nuances and the idiosyncrasies of what guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the improvisational aspect at level 1. Like, as an introductory player, what are you doing to take a solo over those changes?
Well, most of the time, kind of the easiest approach is to what I call kind of key center playing, which is like figure out what key you're in, find a scale that fits that key, and just sort of paint with a broad brush over the whole progression with that scale. And that can work really well with like classic diatonic chord progressions where everything lives within one key. If your whole chord progression is in the key of G major and you play a G major scale over it, you can't really hit a wrong note. It's like, it's just a matter of taste. With the blues, it's a little different. If we're playing basic major chords like that, you could play a major scale. But generally with the blues, if it's a major major tonality, it's going to be dominant chords, which means a major chord with a flat 7. So that sound, and they're all going to be dominant chords. So the C is going to be that, and the D is going to be that. So that's not really a diatonic chord progression. There's not
What do you mean by diatonic?
Well, it's not all within the key of G major. Like if we play this, that, like the C7 has this F note in it, which is not in a G major scale. The C7 has that B flat in it, which is not in a G major scale.
Yeah.
But you can kind of get away with playing a combination of your major pentatonic and your minor pentatonic scales. So those are your 5-note, kind of stripped down 5-note scales. So the major pentatonic in G is that, and your minor pentatonic is that. And if you start putting together some licks using those scales and kind of, adding some bends and some embellishments, you can start getting a pretty good bluesy sound over chord progressions like that. And you hear a lot of guys do that. It's more of a stylistic thing. The way I use it now when I'm thinking about playing over blues, if I'm thinking about a pentatonic thing, it's more of a stylized kind of flavor. Yeah. And I'm thinking about, great blues players. Otis Roush plays like minor pentatonic all the time over the blues, or Albert King, or guys like that. So, I'll think kind of like I want a sound, I'm not really thinking about the chord tones and like every specific note, does it fit over the chord? Yeah. It's more a flavor. But you can really get a lot of mileage out of that stuff. And one of the great things when you're starting out, and this was like for me, the big thing, you have so much work to do with just getting a good sound out of the instrument. So kind of keeping the harmony, the theory and harmony side of it as simple as possible allows you to really focus in on like what you're doing with your hands, the kind of sound that you're getting. If you just stick to, a simple phrase like that, which is right out of the minor pentatonic scale, but you really focus in on getting that to sound good, thinking about the dynamics of the notes within the line, and just thinking about how you want the notes to sound, the tone you're going for, things like vibrato, touch, I mean, you can get so much out of that.
Big. And what should folks be thinking about in terms of mixing the two, minor and major pentatonic?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways you can kind of approach that. Like a simple, is not a, when we start talking about pentatonics, it's kind of like, you can get really detail oriented with what notes are in these scales and what notes are in the chords and how do they fit over it. And there's different things, like you can play the major pentatonic over the G chord and then switch to the minor pentatonic over the C chord. That kind of stuff works. It gets kind of limiting. It's good to go down those paths and experiment. Like if I play a G major pentatonic kind of lick over the G chord, and then when I go to the C chord, if I go, I go to a minor thing, and then I'm back to major, and then over the D, minor over all that, and then you can do stuff like that, but the other kind of way that maybe people, that's kind of going back and forth between major and minor,
Yeah.
which a lot of people do. But the way that I started to think about it was actually like overlaying the two scales over top of one another. So you're actually using elements of both. And this is kind of like, without getting too deep into like, well, what are the actual notes that I'm playing? What are the actual notes of the scales? Which, you know, later on learning guitar, I found to go down that kind of chord tone path to be way more useful. But a lot of people, when they're starting out, are learning these pentatonic scales. So when you see the two overlaid, then it's like you get this kind of combination of things where you have the minor third and the major third in there. You have the major 6 and you have the flat 7 in there. So now you can start to put together these lines where you're actually playing elements of both scales. And in the beginning, you're just going to kind of use your ear to sort of find what works over the chords. But that's, again, why it's so important to have that form internalized. And, you know, again, this is just kind of starting out stuff. You know, it's definitely, you can spend a lot of time just working out these scale patterns, you know, just learning, you know, your G major pentatonic and minor pentatonic scales all over the fretboard. I mean, just knowing all that stuff, you know, takes time to work out, you know.
So let's talk about level 2 then. Once people have this foundation of, they kind of know the form, they know when to switch, and they got some rhythm down, and maybe they're using the minor and major pentatonic interchangeably, but still not necessarily describing the chords. Where do we go from there? Where's level 2?
Well, so this is like, I think the most important or just most useful kind of fundamental thing you can learn on the guitar. And that's just mapping out the chord tones. And it takes a little time of sitting down and going, okay, you know, what are the actual chords that I'm playing over? What are the notes in the chords? And then how do I play those all over the fretboard? And the blues, a 12-bar blues like this is a great way to start getting into this. And it, you know, this is the kind of technique you can use over 1 million songs. It particularly works great if you're playing more complex chord progressions, things that change keys, like old standards and stuff. This is kind of a great technique for that. But basically what you're going to do is going to go, okay, isolate the chords that you have. So you have a G7, you know, is your first chord. The notes are G, B, D, and F. So those are the 4 notes of the chord. And how can I play those 4 notes everywhere on the fretboard? And this is where those 5 caged shapes come in. You know, for people that aren't familiar with that, there's a million resources to learn that kind of stuff. It's pretty popular. But you can take these 5 shapes and play these 4 notes of this chord all over the fretboard. So if I just play a G7, right, I've got it's the root, major, 3rd, 5th, and flat 7, right? G, B, D, and F. And then I can play that across all 6 strings in this position, right? And then I can move that up to the next position, and up to the next position, and up to the next position, and then the 5th and final position. So now I've just spelled out a G7 chord all across the fretboard. But the real trick and key to practicing this stuff is practicing it in the context of the song form and mapping out the 3 chords of the blues in one position at a time. So taking your G7 here and pairing that together with the arpeggio shape for this C chord right here. Right, so now you've got G7 and C7. And then your third chord of the blues is your D7, so taking this shape. So you can sit and just practice that. I mean, I spent a whole year of my life practicing this as a kid. But you sit here and you just, run these things down to get them under your fingers, G7, C7, and D7. Now you've got that position mapped out with your chord tones, and then you move it up through the positions, and you can just build on it slowly, as you get one down, start, moving them around. You got G7, C7, and D7. And there's only 5 shapes. You just kind of have to move them around to fit the chords.
Yeah.
You just keep going up. Right, and all through all 5 positions. But then when you start putting that, so the first step is pretty important, because having some basic ideas to play over the form, like understanding the song form, understanding, the kind of phrasing of the chord lengths of the blues, and internalizing the feel and the groove, and then having a few basic blues licks or pentatonic things under your fingers that you can already play, and that you kind of already understand, like where they fit in the form, how you can phrase a solo, where to leave spaces. When you have that together and then you add this second layer to it, it can be pretty eye-opening, because now you're starting to see those notes you really want to target to outline the chords.
Yeah.
It's all your chord tones. So if you're playing, all my pentatonic stuff. Right, if I play that, like you can hear the chord progression happening,
changes underneath
within the changes, because I'm just targeting those chord tones. As I understand the form, I kind of have an internal, clock going of like where the chords are changing, and I can use those arpeggio shapes, those maps of the chord tones, to target those things when the chord comes, and I can just kind of play my pentatonic blues licks, classic stuff. Like I don't even really think about it too much in terms of what's the notes that I'm playing. I just think, okay, well this, that's just a classic kind of intro phrase to a blues, or so that kind of sets me up, and then I'm still just kind of playing my pentatonic blues. Right, and then now I'm outlining that chord, and then I'm back to my, and then I know the D chord's coming, so it's like, okay, if I stick in this position, there's my D7, all my notes of the D7, so right, I can just I can get to that chord, and then right, and so that overlaying of those two things, your basic kind of pentatonic blues phrases, then with all the chord tones mapped out.
Yeah.
It is a huge. I mean, you could play that all day long and just end
That's
there
it,
and be
yeah.
like,
Level
okay.
2. Well, so what's interesting is having seen a lot of people go through this learning process. What tends to happen around level 2 is the thing that everyone fears, which is like if you learn theory, it's going to sterilize your playing, because everyone starts learning these arpeggios and they're like, I had all the feeling when I was just ripping B.B. King riffs. We should talk about transcription and who to listen to later. But then they start playing these arpeggios and they're like, it just doesn't feel as good. Can you talk about that transition through?
Well, it just takes time. I mean, anytime you're learning something new, especially like something kind of, I don't even know what the right word is, but it's sort of just an exercise kind of thing. Like, okay, or if it's a scale shape or something, there's a learning curve to it. I mean, in the beginning, you're kind of, as you're practicing, you're going to go, oh, now I have to play the arpeggio, and it's going to sound like an arpeggio. That's just inevitable. But the key is always thinking phrasing and thinking musically, and then just, it's a blueprint. Like an arpeggio shape like that is just a map of where the chord tones are. Mm. It doesn't determine what you're gonna play or have to play,
or what order you play.
It's there for you to use as a resource to go, oh, okay. And I find, so like practicing how to practice and everything is kind of important. What I have always done, first of all, I've always been playing gigs ever since I was young. And so there's no better practice than like going and playing gigs, especially if you're working on blues, playing some blues gigs is great because you'll understand what you know and what you don't know really quickly. Things that you might have down when you're practicing at home will reveal themselves whether you have them down or not when you're playing with a band on stage. Sometimes you'll think, oh, I've got this really together, and then you go to play it on a gig and it's like not there. So then that becomes like a great gauge of what you need to work on. And a lot of times, still to this day, every time I play a gig, I'm thinking about things that I'm hearing in my head that I want to play that maybe I don't quite have under my hands, or I'm not even quite sure how to get them out of the guitar, but they're kind of in the back of my mind, and my ear is like, oh, it would be nice to be able to do that. So then that becomes something to work on and something to practice. Mm. And so I'm always about practicing in kind of a musical way. And I'm always thinking about like a real world application for anything I'm practicing. So if I'm working on these blues arpeggio, like these dominant seventh arpeggios for blues, the first thing I'm going to think is, okay, well, what would I actually play? Like if you're counting off a tune and you look at me and go, okay, you take the first couple choruses of a blues, what am I actually going to play? How am I going to start it? Am I going to start it like, or am I going to start it? If that's what it is, then it's like, okay, that's a great way to start, Then if I want to go to the 4 chord from there, I'm going, okay, well, this is where I am on the fretboard. If I'm practicing, I can just play that much and then stop and go, okay, how do I get to the notes of the 4 chord? What are they all? And I can stop and I can go, okay, it's this chord shape. This is the arpeggio shape that goes with that chord shape. I'm playing this note. Where do I want to go from there? What's nearby? I'm not going to go, I mean, I could, but I'm probably not going to want to do that. I'm going to want to get to a chord tone that's nearby. So I'm looking at this chord. I mean, that note, that G note is in the chord. That's the 5th of the chord. But I could also go down to the 3rd. I could go up to the flat 7. I could go up to the root. I could use something out of, the pentatonic scale or a scale to get to one of those notes. So then it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Let me try some things. So if I go, right, so there I did like sort of a little chromatic, what you call a chromatic enclosure, but to get to that chord tone. And then I'm back to my G chord. And then, right, I could do anything, or I could do, different things. But by starting out with a phrase, it gives me some context. It gives me like, okay, I'm in this position. What's nearby? What am I going to use? And you don't have to play that much of the arpeggio. You can just use it to target chord tones.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting transition point. So often what will happen is people will learn these arpeggios, and because we practice them from the bottom up, that's sort of the only way they can play them. So it seems like level 2 is we've come from this pentatonic world. We're introducing arpeggios, and we're starting to get familiar with where these chord tones live, but we're probably still playing them linearly through the arpeggio. We're getting a sense for where they live across the fretboard. Talk to me about level 3. Where do we go from here?
Well, there's so many different things you can start to introduce when you want to get into. The blues is really a pretty open canvas for a lot of things. It is the basis of like so much of music, jazz, rock, funk, whatever, and so even harmonically, there is a lot you can do even just with these simple 3 chords to expand on the sound. And once you get this kind of basic chord tone thing together and you're able to really outline the sound of the chords, you can start expanding on that harmony and pushing it into new directions. One of the things that, I like to do is mess around with chord substitutions. You can get deep into this kind of stuff, but a lot of people, understanding the harmony like to a little bit further degree, and this kind of goes with what you're saying about, some people are sort of turned off by learning theory, but I tend to think, I tend to break things up into more categories. A lot of people think theory and they just think, oh, if you're playing an arpeggio, that's theory. But to me, that's kind of, you should know the notes of the chords that you're playing. I don't really even think that's music theory. That's just music. Like, you should know the notes, what the notes are in the chords you're playing over. And learning them all over the fretboard is like learning the guitar. It's just fundamental stuff about learning the fretboard. To me, the term music theory is a little weird because I don't really understand what that term means, theory. It's like, I tend to use the term harmony, like understanding the relationships between the notes and the chords that you're playing, understanding, the relationships of how these things fit together, whether it's like Bach or whether it's Miles Davis or whether it's, B.B. King. It's like you kind of understand how this thing fits with that thing and how they connect together. And so when you start understanding the harmony of the blues, when you have 3 dominant chords, it's a very kind of unique thing, because a lot of music theory, classic harmony, Western harmony kind of comes from classical music, where it's sort of fits into these diatonic boxes, like, okay, it's in this major key and these are the notes of that major scale and these are the chords that stretch out from that major scale. And then you can introduce new sounds and chords and borrow chords from other things. But The blues, it like already starts out right away by just breaking all those rules, because it's like a G7 chord is the first chord. You know, it's in a dominant key. And then the second chord is not in that same dominant key.
Right.
It's not, you know, if we were to play like a G dominant scale, and then we play a C7, it doesn't have the same notes in it. And a D7 is even different. So it's kind of, you kind of introduce some different harmony things to think about, which really is kind of like what then stems out to like a lot of jazz harmony. But basically, the main thing that I think about with these dominant chords is the transitions between the chords. So if we're just playing a G7, static G7 chord, you know, there's lots, the thing you would play would be like a G7 scale.
Is there a reason you don't call that Mixolydian?
Oh, not really. I don't really think in terms of major scale modes.
Cool.
I never have.
Yeah.
I learned them a long time. I don't even know if I can name them all, honestly. I learned them a long time ago, but I never found that to be
useful.
And we can get into this later, but I do use modes like melodic minor modes.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, that seems to work with when I'm thinking about those kinds of things. But major scale modes, like the idea of playing, so modes are like you're playing the major scale and just playing it over different chords. So like a G Mixolydian scale would be like the C major scale. So you're playing C major over a G chord, and that gives you Mixolydian. To me, that's a little, I never quite understood that way of thinking. I get that it's a little bit easier if you know a C major scale. It becomes easier to see it all over the fretboard.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm playing G7, if I'm playing a blues at G7, I should be thinking about G.
Yeah.
In the key of G, not C.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think about like, well, what makes it a G7? Well, it's the flat 7. So it's a major scale with a flat 7, which to me is a G dominant scale, G7 scale.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think about any mode. Like if we're playing D minor and it has a major 6 in it, yeah, it's a D Dorian scale, but to me it's a minor 6, you know?
Yeah.
It's that
Minor
sound.
major
It's a
6.
minor 6 chord. It's a minor. It's a minor scale with that, you know, major 6.
Yeah.
So that's just why I've always thought of it that way.
Go a little side trail into modes,
but yeah. So yeah, going back to the transition between the chords. So just to get into the simple kind of harmonic concept, when you go from G7 to C, the transition between that chord is an interesting spot because, you know, the G7 is actually functioning as the dominant 5 chord heading into C. And dominant chords, like if you play a C major scale and you play the chords of C major, right? You get C major 7, you get D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7. G7 naturally occurs as the 5 chord. And it's got a specific kind of role to play in that it really pulls your ear back to that 1, you know, back to the 1 chord, back to the C major chord. It's kind of has this natural tension built in that pulls you back to the tonic chord. So you can kind of use that. I mean, this is what people talk about secondary dominant chords. You kind of use that tension of dominant chords to resolve within a chord progression to different places. So G7 is kind of acting, even though we're in the key of G and it's the 1 chord technically, in this spot, it's acting as the 5 chord resolving to to C, just the same way as the D7 at the end of the form is the 5 chord resolving back to G. So you have these two 5-to-1 cadences, and this is like an area that's kind of ripe for expanding on the harmony. And the way that the first way that I started diving into that was using diminished arpeggios over those what are called functioning dominant chords. And I think I first heard this from like Grant Green doing this kind of stuff. But basically, you're going to throw away the root of the chord and you're going to play the third, fifth, flat 7, and then that's a diminished triad right there. If you make it a full diminished 7th chord, right, you get this note, the A flat, which is a half step up from the root, which is the flat 9. So that's like our first introduction of like an outside note, a kind of colorful outside note, right? But you get this kind of sound, this diminished, if you play G in the bass, and that really resolves nicely. It sounds dissonant on its own, but you know, if you're playing right, it resolves really nicely. It builds an extra level of tension to that dominant chord. So you can take that and expand it out into lines. And if you know your all the stuff we've talked about up to this point, you can create some nice things out of that. So I can play standard blues phrase, right? And then here going to the C chord and resolve to a chord tone of C. Right, and expand on that sound. So, you know, and there's so much more you can build on that, but that, you know, that's one of those things that starts to, you know, break you out of the basic pentatonic thing and the really inside chord tone thing.
Yeah, so what I'm picking up is like around level 1, we've got these basic chords, the basic form, pentatonics, major, minor.
Yeah.
And we've got some chord tone stuff. And now what you're introducing is really two things. One is thinking ahead to the next chord. So I'm about to land on the 4 chord. What can I do melodically that works over the current chord, but also, you know, points us in the direction of the next thing? And the device that you're suggesting here is diminished chords work great, especially between the 1 and the 4. Do you use that diminished idea over the 1, the 4, and the 5 because they're all
well, the
chords?
4 chord, it's all about like it's the space between the chords. It's like what you talked about. It's like looking forward and seeing where you're going. So the 4 chord going back to the 1 chord doesn't have that same 5-to-1 function.
Right.
There's other things you can play in that spot.
Yeah.
But really it's the 5 chord going back to the 1 chord. So at the very end of the form, if we do like a basic turnaround, right there, as you go back to the 1 chord, you could play, you know, any of these things. Right, you can, like a simple little thing to just get started with it is if you're playing a dominant chord, a functioning dominant chord, like in this case the D7 is the 5 chord of G, and you see this dominant 7 shape, find the third of the chord, and then go up a series of minor thirds. That gives you your diminished 7th thing. And you could do it on one string if you're trying to fish out the notes, you know. There's all your notes, and then you can do it in position. and use that. That's going to give you this like dominant flat 9 thing. But again, it's got that like natural half step tension built into it. So
Do you have a preferred shape for that diminished arpeggio in position? I know it repeats, but do you have a shape that you like?
Well, not. I mean, it's weird. It's a little bit strange because it's a symmetrical thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could play, and you could. The thing that I like to do is actually take shapes that feel good under the fingers, because it is it's a little bit of a weirder. It's a little bit. There's a lot of ways you could play that, but I'll take a shape like that and then move it up.
Same shape.
Yeah, and you can do little exercises like if I just take those 4 notes and I go, that's over D7, and then I'm going back to G. I want to resolve to G. I can go. It resolves to that note resolves back to the 5th of the G. I mean, basically, you've got a 4-note chord resolving to a 4-note chord. So right. You can it's like sort of a simple, connect the dots thing. It's like this. If I start here, that resolves there. If I move it up, that resolves to the flat 7 of G, right? If I go, that resolves to the root. So I've done the 5th, 7th, and root, flat 7 and root so far. Now if I go up one more, there's the 3rd, right? So, and then any of those become cool things to play. So again, going back to the previous thing, if you're kind of figuring out ways to navigate through these things and trying to develop vocabulary as you're practicing, and you take, a simple phrase, right? And then you go, okay, how do I find the 4 chord from here? And it's like, there's my chord tones, but I want to play a diminished thing. There's my 4 chord, and then back to my 1 chord. Now to my 5 chord. Now maybe I want to play. And again, you can just kind of practice it slowly like that, almost free of time to just kind of figure out where the notes are and what sounds good. And some of that stuff, may not sound good to you. You just kind of have to maneuver it around to see what fits. And you'll end up finding like your kind of go-to things that you use that work under you. I mean, so much of it is just like what feels good under the fingers too. You don't want to be, at least I don't want to be, doing some weird maneuvers that don't feel natural. Especially if I'm playing blues, I want it to feel comfortable so that the phrasing feels good and that, the articulation and the touch and everything sounds good.
Yeah. Do you have any, so we've got these substitution chords for the 1 chord and the 5 chord. What tips do you have? Do you do any substitutions on 4 when you're? Yeah,
so, I mean, the classic thing to do over the 4 chord to go back to the 1 chord is just go a half step up and play the diminished thing. You hear this all the time where it goes, to the 4 chord, the C chord, and then up to a sharp 4 diminished chord, and then back to the 1. And you can do You can do that even if the underlying harmony doesn't do that. I do that all the time because it's such a quick transitional thing. You can just sort of overlay that in there to kind of bend your ear. And I'll do like simple things, like I do this one all the time, where I do kind of outlining a C7, and then just moving that up, because three of the notes of the C7 and C sharp diminished 7 are the same. It's just that root moving up. So things like that really work well.
Really it's the same concept. It's like a diminished arpeggio half step above the root of the chord.
It's similar.
But the treatment's a bit different.
It doesn't quite resolve in the same way. Like if I was to play, I'm not playing it. If I was to play diminished thing off the third, right, that resolves back to F, not to G, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different. It would be, that kind of a sound.
So you sort of have to bend it at the end.
Yeah, but it's another way to use that diminished arpeggio stuff. And again, the cool thing about all that stuff is you start getting into that. This is like the kind of stuff I talk about a lot to people and teach to people that get stuck in ruts with pentatonic shapes. Mm-hmm. And maybe they know how to introduce some chord tones into their pentatonic stuff, but they kind of feel like when they're thinking about playing, everything is stemming from some kind of linear scale thing. Mm-hmm. When you start getting into the chord substitutions, you can start playing longer lines where you haven't even really thought about or played intentionally out of a scale at all. Mm-hmm. Because these diminished things can string together with sort of the bigger picture thing, which would be like 2-5-1s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. So that's sort of level 3. Where do we go from here? Level 4.
Well, harmonically, it would be kind of getting into more, just pushing that envelope further of like, well, what other outside notes can we use? How can we build even more tension? How can we stretch our ear and the listener's ear even more? So like this kind of concept ties together pretty well with the 2-5-1 thing. So a 2-5-1 is just a chord sequence. And it basically, like if you were to play it in C major, you would just play the 2 chord of C major, which is D minor, the 5 chord of C major, which is G7, and then the 1 chord, which is C major. In a classic sense, it would be like D minor 7, G dominant 7, and then C major 7. Most of the time in 2-5-1s, that G7 is going to have some kind of altered color to it. So you could do the diminished thing. You could do an augmented thing. You could do any, combination of altered notes. But that's sort of a classic, 2-5-1 cadence. In a blues, you can put that in to go to the 4 chord, just like we kind of use this diminished substitution. We can add to the front of that this D minor and then resolve to like a C7 because we're playing the blues. So now, we get, if we kind of string together some ideas, and where we would do just, we can tag on the front of that like a little bit of a D minor 7. Or so now we get these longer lines where we're just playing, D minor 7.
Arpeggio.
Our diminished arpeggio, which in this case I'm starting on a B, so it'd be like a B diminished. So D minor, B diminished, and then chord tones of C, right? So then, you get a ton of things you can do with that, right.
And so we're not actually, say we're playing in the key of G, when you say 2-5-1 of C, we're kind of implying
we're
there's
going to the
a
fourth
new diatonic kind of space that we're temporarily living within, which is C major for a moment. We're playing D minor, which is that 2 chord of C, G, which is technically the 1 chord of like the key we're playing in, but it's the 5 temporarily of C.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's kind of the whole trick with all this is we're really leaning into that G7, its role of pushing you towards the C major, like its role of kind of building tension, and we're just sort of expanding on that natural thing that's within the chord.
Yeah. Do you ever go further back? Like, do you ever go to the 6-2-5-1?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can. There's definitely like when you start getting into like jazz blues things, like Blues for Alice, I think by Charlie Parker has those kind of changes. And I mean, if you get into like a more of a jazz blues type thing where you have, the 6 or the 3, 6, 2, 5, then you get all that kind of stuff. For sure. But I mean, the stuff with this is kind of like this stuff works even if you're playing a simple bar band blues tune and nobody's playing any hip chord substitutions underneath. You can still, you can be playing all your straight ahead blues stuff and then you can start sneaking that stuff in there.
So it's really this blend of chord tone soloing. We've got your pentatonic ideas and licks. Then we've got these chord substitutions, starting with the diminished arpeggio before landing on the chord, and then at level 4 we're backing up even further to start with the two of the
2-5-1
2-5-1 going
chord.
Four.
And you can expand on that even more. I mean, you can play another great chord substitution over a minor chord is to start on the minor third of the chord and play a major 7 arpeggio. So if our 2-5-1 going to C starts with D minor 7, we can play F major 7, and that gives us it's like a upper structure 7th chord, right? We get the minor third, the 5th, the flat 7, and the 9. So we're taking away the root, and it's similar to the diminished thing, but so now we've got that. We can play, and again, if you know your arpeggio shapes, everywhere. It's super useful because then you can start tying that in. So instead of now playing our D minor, we can start on, right? So there's F major 7 starting on the 7. And then our diminished thing landing on C. So now and we can go right back to playing the blues. All these things are kind of cumulative, you know. It's like it's not like any one thing is better. They're just different options, different paths to go down, and different things to experiment with. And I like to blend them all together if the music calls for it. You know, if you're sometimes playing some of these more sophisticated kind of outside concepts don't really work in the specific style of song you're playing. You know, if you're playing some real kind of down and dirty blues thing, you might want to, it might not work. You might try it and you don't like it. But at the same time, you might be tired with your straight ahead pentatonic blues stuff, and you might be going, well, what else? What other things can I play?
Yeah.
And then just finding the right balance and messing with it. It's like, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to get this stuff to start to feel natural.
Well, I'm curious. So that makes a lot of sense for level 4. For level 5, I would love to, well, number one, see kind of like what level 5 looks like, both from a scale perspective. I know we mentioned it earlier, but some of this melodic minor stuff, as well as like, seems like articulation becomes really kind of where the sauce is at. So I'm curious if you might break down some of those things for us.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, just building harmonically on what we talked about before, that 5 chord, that any of these functioning dominant chords, like G7 going to C, there's a few scales you can use to like further alter those scales. The one I use all the time is the altered scale, or like the super Locrian mode. You know, I just always have called it the altered scale. To me, the altered scale is, if we play a G altered scale, which is what we'd use to go to C, the altered scale is one of these things, it's propelling forward, it's moving forward. It's not a scale. If we're playing a vamp, like a G7 vamp, I'm not going to play the altered scale. I'm only going to play it if we're going to C. Right? It wants to resolve because it's got a lot of tension in it. But if we play just in one octave, you know, that's a simple way to learn it. It's just these notes. It's the root. It's the, I mean, you can call it different things, but the way I think about it, and if you go on the internet, you'll find a million people
Someone's
that
going to fight you in the
disagree.
comments, yeah.
There's a million explanations. People try to simplify it. To me, what it is, the altered scale is a recipe for dominant chords. It's all your ingredients that you can blend together in different ways to come up with different altered dominant chords. So at the core of the altered scale is the root, the major third, and the flat 7. That's your basic dominant 7 kind of shell voicing. Then the other notes you have are altered upper extensions you can put on top of that. So you have the flat 9 you can put on top of that, which is kind of like our diminished thing we were doing. You have the sharp 9 you can put on top of that. You have the sharp 11 you can put on top of that. Again, I'm just playing root, 3rd, 7th shell voicing and putting the sharp 11 on top, and you can put the flat 13. Now, some people will call that a flat 5 and a sharp 5, but to me, they're upper extensions that go on top of that basic dominant chord. So it's root, 3rd, 7th, flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13. That's the way I think about the scale, because that's how I'm going to choose notes to build dominant 7th, altered dominant 7th chords. So like, for instance, I play, you know, if I play this, that's like a rootless voicing. I've got flat 7, major 3rd, flat 13, and sharp 9 on top. So if I play a 2-5-1, there's my D minor 7. I can play that altered voicing. I can drop it down to there, and then I can play, resolve to my 1 chord. So, right. So that's kind of that, from a chord perspective, how I think about it. But, the scale, has all kinds of great applications too. So, we can kind of just drop it in that same spot. So if I play my D minor 7 or my substitute my F major 7 over the D minor, and then I can play my diminished thing, or I can play some kind of altered thing. So I could, right, I get into some different things. Right, I can get into some more expanded sounds. So like, and there's like a lot of really standard phrases you hear in especially in more jazz-oriented playing. But one of the first altered kind of things I ever learned was like that type of lick, like. Right, which is just all those altered notes. There's the sharp 9, flat 9, flat 13 up to flat 7, and then up to basically the 5th of our chord tone of our C chord. So, and you could use that over the 5 chord too. So, right. So again, if that's a sound you're interested in or perks your ear up, it's something to investigate, and that's kind of how it's used. It's used in that spot. But so much of making that stuff work comes down to how you play those things. Yeah. Phrasing is big. And I think the number one thing with blues is the dynamics within the line. A lot of people talk about vibrato and things like that, which is super important, but I think a technique that kind of gets overlooked a lot is the actual picking dynamics within the contour of the line. So it's when you're playing real expressive kind of blues phrases, you don't want everything to be the same volume. If I'm playing, I want certain notes to be quieter and other notes to be louder. So I might play. Right, that ebb and flow within the line to me is like what really gives your blues phrasing that extra little push into making things more exciting and interesting.
Yeah. Well, with the last couple of minutes here, I'm curious, one of the things that's so unique about your playing, I think, is your articulation. I wonder if you'd show us, 3 or 4 different ways that you approach notes and kind of think about articulation in left and right hand.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's like a lot of, ways you can get creative with like sliding into notes and bending into notes and different types of vibrato you can put on a note. But then, with the right hand, it's kind of like it's definitely dynamics, but there's also a lot of control over the the timbre of the note, like how bright or how dark it is, just by where you're picking and how you're picking. You know, I always use the rounded shoulder of the pick, and you can kind of angle that a little bit more to get a sharper attack, or you can sort of flatten it out to get a little bit, you know, more round. Like that's a little bit more round. If I start angling it back, I get a little bit more of the bite on the pick. And then moving it closer to the fretboard or closer to the bridge. You know, if you the guitar string kind of vibrates at its fullest sort of in the middle. So if you start picking up here, you get a softer, more full vibration. You start moving back here, you start getting more, you know, the string is tighter and you get just a brighter, you know, so messing with that within a phrase, you know. And then again with dynamics, you know, so those things, and then introducing your fingers. You know, I do a couple of things with my fingers. One is to actually, I do this a lot, and I didn't really notice it for a long time, but actually grab the string between I always have the pick, you know, unless I kind of tuck it and I'm just playing with fingers. Most of the time I just kind of have the pick there. And I'll either use my middle finger in combination with the pick, or I'll actually grab the string between my index finger and the pick. And that's great if you want to, you know, put a little extra accent on a note. Right, so I'm, you know, popping that a lot.
You've also got this downward rake thing that you often do at the end of phrases.
Yeah, that's pretty.
The other one, the one.
Oh
the end
yeah.
of the phrase. The fall off.
Yeah.
Well, less. I was hearing at the end of the phrase sort of a descending line.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, you know, phrasing things, thinking about, you know, how you want the line to, what kind of space you want the line to fill. I mean, honestly, I don't think about that stuff so much consciously. I just kind of hear it and kind of chase that sound that I'm hearing. But, you know, listening to certain players, you can pick up a lot of phrasing things. A lot of that kind of like more slightly sophisticated, I guess. It's not maybe the best word for it, but like a little bit more, you know, forward kind of blues playing. Like I get a lot from Robin Ford. You know, Robin Ford's phrasing is pretty exceptional in terms of like how he's placing phrases and stringing together longer phrases that kind of fit in unique sections of the form. And then another guy I love is Lucky Peterson. There's a great album that he played on where he does a lot of that type of phrasing, where it's, you know, it's not quite as conventional as like fitting in these spots. The phrases kind of fall in a different way. But yeah, you know, again, just thinking about the dynamics and like just kind of figuring out how to make the things fit what you're hearing. Like there's a lot of stuff where I may not pick a note, I may play it more in a legato way. You know, like a pull off.
Yeah.
you know, something where, you know, where I'm playing, you know, and then popping the note. And then using my middle finger to pop notes too. And like a combination of things, using the finger and then the pick, so you get, you know.
And then switching this.
Yeah, and then using that's sort of the more extreme
Getting
brightness.
sharper tone.
You know, you can get a lot with just your finger or the pick angle or moving the pick back. But yeah, you have a lot of combinations. Again, like if you play with a cleaner sound, I think some of those things kind of represent better.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. There's a lot to dig into here for folks. So hopefully they enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you coming through.
Yeah,
and
thanks for having
sharing your
me.
wisdom.
Thanks for having me. I don't know if people know that this is filming at like 9 a.m. So, you know,
yeah. It was an early call.
Maybe not, you know, a little bit groggy, but I appreciate it.
Well, this was great. If this is you when you're groggy, you can't imagine when you're fully awake. This is phenomenal. So appreciate you coming through. And if people want to follow up on the things you're doing online, where can they find you?
JackRuch.com, Instagram, YouTube. I've got, you know, course material out on a bunch of platforms and always working on new stuff. So yeah.
Well, Jack, thanks so much for coming through, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Awesome.